Welcome to my personal favorite top 30 roller coasters. I won't be riding any more coasters in the 2019 season, so this is final for this year. As of this video is being made, I've currently ridden 158 different roller coasters. Before we get into the top 30, here are honorable mentions that almost made the list. Skyscream at Holiday Park. This is the only Skyrocket 2 by Premium ride that I've ridden, and it was decent. The launches were forceful and it had some solid hang time, but it didn't blow me away. Manta at SeaWorld San Diego. This is an extremely rideable coaster and it's very fun, but it's not that thrilling, so it also didn't quite make the list. And Raptor and Gemini from Cedar Point. Raptor is rather intense but could have been more intense, and Gemini would technically make the list, but the ride on number 30 is a little bit better in my opinion. Oh, and though I have been to Holiday Park, unfortunately I didn't get to ride Expedition G-Force, so this ride won't be on this list. Now, let's start with number 30. Number 30 is Nessie at Hansa Park. This is one of the coasters I've ridden the most, and yes, it might seem more like a family coaster in the back row. This thing is an airtime machine and this vertical loop is super intense. And overall it has 4 great airtime moments. The first drop has solid floatjector, the second drop ejects you into heaven, then there is a small floater hop, and the drop into the brakes also has some solid floatjector airtime. This is actually a really good ride, and with the retheming, this is awesome. Number 29 says Wicked Twister. This ride is also really good. It's very fun, it's rather intense. Up on the spikes you have some solid 0G, the launches are very forceful, and also this coaster is extremely re-rideable. On number 28 is the only coaster from Europa Park that made it, Silver Star, their B&M Hypercoaster. Silver Star is actually one of the largest and longest B&M Hypercoasters, but this thing has about no airtime. The only moment with airtime is the drop of the mid-course, and the only other really forceful part is the double transition into the brakes. The first drop is rattling, and the other hills have no airtime at all. This isn't that great of a ride, but it's a B&M Hyper, and it had still some solid speeds to it, so I can't rank it that much lower. On number 27 we have another ride from B&M, Valkyria, Liesberg's B&M Dive Coaster. This is currently my second favorite dive coaster. It's pretty good, it has some solid theming, the first drop is really good, and it has some rather unique elements for a dive coaster, like an overbank turn and an inline twist. It's pretty solid. It's also not the shortest dive coaster, and it has no mid-course brake run, so you're flying from the drop into the brakes. I like this coaster. It could be a little more intense, and I don't like the vest restraints, but the rest is pretty solid. Number 26 is gonna be extremely unpopular, but I have Terran. If you know me, you know that I don't like this coaster. The only reason why it made this list is because I absolutely love the second launch and the theming is awesome, but the rest of the ride is kinda forgettable. It's not a bad coaster, it's very smooth, it's very long, but it does not do that much, so I can't rank it higher. Just entering the top 25 is Banshee, Kings Island's B&M inverted coaster. While I don't like vest restraints on dive coasters, on this B&M invert they fit surprisingly well. This is currently the longest inverted coaster in the world and the most inverting one, and this is pretty good. It has some sustained forces, some parts could be a little more intense, but I really love the set of elements. Especially the last inversion has some solid hang time and it's kinda surprising, and it's very smooth, but if you're sitting on the outside seat and not in the very front or the back, it can rattle quite a bit. Right above Banshee is another ride from Kings Island, Mystic Timbers. This is a great GCI wooden coaster, it's very smooth, but it's kinda short and the return trip isn't the best paced. But the first half, from the drop to the return trip, oh my god, that is so intense, there's some great airtime and it's extremely whoopy. But I wish it would do this on the return trip, but it doesn't, so it's a little underwhelming. And Mystic Timbers' legendary shed at the end, that is trash. On 23 is the 100th coaster that I've ridden, Yukon Striker at Canada's Wonderland, my favorite dive coaster. This dive coaster is pretty solid, it's very intense, it's rather long for a dive coaster, the first drop is awesome, it has some solid theming, the vertical loop is extremely intense, and I like this ride. It's overall very sustained in terms of forces, it has some 0G moments but it could be a little crazier. And though I'd say there's nothing it does perfect, there's also nothing it really lacks. I don't like PTC trains, but the Beast at King's Island, this is a great ride. It's a little rattly, and the helix at the end, which is the best part of the ride, is rough. You get a headache from this thing, but let's be honest, this ride is long, flying through the forest is insane, the double helix at the end is fantastic. This is a good ride. I don't know where the hate is coming from. I mean, yes, straight tracks in the forest, but is that a bad thing? No, I like it. Another wooden coaster also with PTC trains is Ravine Flyer 2. I was a little scared that this thing could be rough because of the PTC trains, but honestly it wasn't. It was rather smooth and had only a few small jerks, but this thing is very well paced in the first half and has some solid airtime moments. I didn't ride it in the back and not quite in the very front, only in the front car, but I still like it. It's very unique, the layout is awesome, it has two overbank turns and the bridge where you fly over the road twice, so these things and a great layout with some solid airtime, this is definitely it, a ride that should be on your bucket list. On number 20 is the original hypercoaster Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. This ride is awesome. It's not rough, it only has a few bumps. The turnaround element is probably the part where it's just a bit bumpy, but the first drop isn't that special and this first airtime hill is also not that crazy, but the return trip, there are some great airtime moments. They aren't too sustained, but being ejected into your bar, it's painful airtime. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. And that's the reason why this thing ranks so high, because of this awesome, strong, painful airtime. A ride that lacks strong or even painful airtime is Colossus at Hyde Park, Interman's first prefabricated wooden coaster. This ride is very smooth if you have seen my review, and it has some theming and it's not that short, but the airtime moments aren't that special, so if the first two hills gave stronger airtime, I would immediately rank this higher, but the last few hills aren't that great and none of the airtime moments is really so good. It's still a very good ride, so it's getting the 19th spot, but it lacks strong airtime to be ranked higher. Lost Gravity at Walibi Holland is the number 18 in my list. Now, while this ride isn't the most smooth, the first drop is aggressive. This thing has some awesome ejector moments in the first half, and the second half has some nice inversions. It's also pretty well themed, and I do like the trains. And because this ride isn't that smooth, it actually feels more intense, so I love it. Another ride that is pretty intense is Flug der Dämonen, the B&M Wing coaster at Hyde Park. This is my favorite coaster at Hyde Park, and it's not that long, and the theming isn't the best, but this thing is pretty intense. The first drop is really good. It has great zero-G moments, all of the inversions are awesome, and even the other turns are really intense. This is an intense coaster with nice zero-G moments in between. And I often feel that this ride is underappreciated. I mean, this thing has better airtime than Colossus, and that's saying something. Let's move on to my favorite wooden coaster, Boulder. Not only is this ride an awesome first drop, it's also filled with airtime. There's just so much, and the airtime is a little bit of floater, but mostly flow ejector and even some ejector moments at the end. It's very smooth, although the turns aren't anything special. This ride is very long, and you can never go wrong with a smooth and long ride with many great airtime moments. Now, halfway through, let's come to the top 15. Now the rides are starting to get insane. On number 15 is Fluch von Novgorod at Hansa Park. This ride has some great airtime moments, a great launch, a very whippy inversion, a fantastic indoor part, and the theming is out of this world. This ride is awesome. There is one part where it's a little rattly and bumpy, that's the turnaround element, but other than that it's smooth, well themed, and the ride experience is very long. That's Gerstlauer quality right there. Another ride by Gerstlauer is Carajo, the Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster at Trepsdrill. While the theming isn't as good as the one at Novgorod and the launch isn't that strong, this thing has some great inversions. The dive loop at the end, the corkscrew at the end, the hardline roll indoor and the big dive loop outdoors. The top hat is also a great moment with some solid airtime. Though there isn't too much airtime on this ride, it's very intense, it has a very unique layout, and from the outside it's just a whole mess of track. And besides one turn, this ride is also glossy smooth. On number 13 is Behemoth, the B&M hypercoaster at Canada's Wonderland. This ride is long and has many great airtime moments. The only downside of this ride is that it's rattling from almost start to finish, but you can partly ignore it because of the great airtime moments and the fantastic first drop. By just being a slightly bit better is Diamondback, the B&M hypercoaster at King's Island. While this ride hasn't that many great airtime moments, the first two airtime moments of this thing are better, and it also has a solid drop and is awesome splashdown. And this ride is buttery smooth from start to finish. Not quite making the top 10 is Black Mamba at Phantasialand. This ride doesn't only have the best theming I've ever experienced on a coaster, but it's non-stop intense. The inversions are just so intense. And from the outside you can't tell where the ride is going next. This is the most intense coaster by B&M that I've ridden. And now let's start with the top 10. On number 10 is Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm. This ride is one of the best launches I've ever experienced. The acceleration on this coaster is incredible. The top hat is really awesome with some great airtime, and the overbank turns are really intense. And though it's short, what it packs in into the layout is awesome. And for a prototype ride, this is even better. On number 9 we have another launch coaster, Helix at Liseberg. This ride is great. While the launches aren't the best and some elements could be better, overall this ride just packs in so much and it's so much fun. But it's not perfectly smooth, it has a rattle. But the great elements, some strong airtime moments and the perfect terrain usage make up for that. If you are one of those crazy airtime junkies, Piraten is for you. This ride has some crazy twisted airtime hills. All the airtime is fully ejected, there's so much of it. Some of the hills are really sustained. The first drop also has a bad airtime, and the first turn is also super intense. This ride does just so many things great, and it's not even that large. Another ride, also by Intermin, that is also not that big, that it also has great airtime moments but not quite as much, is Maverick. This ride is very intense, it is extremely whippy, the Stangle dive is awesome, it has some solid airtime moments, it has even some theming, which is rare at Cedar Point, a decent drop, it also runs over water, and though it's great, the trim brakes right after the second launch kinda kill off the second half, which doesn't keep the Stangle dive from being awesome. I kinda wanna see this ride with lap bars because some of those transitions would be so crazy, and then this ride would be immediately in my top 3. But it's number 7 in my list, so it's freaking awesome. Another ride, right next to Maverick, also from Intermin, is Millennium Force, the original Giga Coaster. Oh, I love this coaster. It's rather intense in some parts, it has some floater airtime and even some ejector parts at the end. It's extremely long, buttery smooth, and this ride provides an awesome feeling of speed. I can see why some people call this thing forceless, on the other hand, it's definitely not. Again, besides the feeling of speed, there is nothing it's really great at, but it's also nothing it lacks. Okay, maybe airtime, but this thing isn't built for airtime. And though I could have ridden it more times, I only have ridden it twice, once in the back and once in the front. This is a front row ride, but the drop is better in the back of course. Another Giga coaster that's just doing a little more is my personal favorite coaster by B&M, Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. Now we are in the top 5 and this ride is so awesome. It provides an even greater feeling of speed, some better floater airtime moments, some better turns, definitely the better drop. And another aspect that makes me love this thing even more is, when I visited Canada's Wonderland, both days it was very hot, so this ride was the perfect method to cool down. The wind that is blowing into your face is absolutely nuts. On number 4 we have Top Thrill Dragster. Yes, it's short, but I've already said many times, the launch is the best launch I've ever experienced. Up there on the top hat, that feeling is unbelievable. Going down the spiral drop is awesome, flying into your brakes is awesome, waiting on the launch track and with this guy saying arms down and then putting your arms up when it launches again, and the dragster sound effect. This isn't only just a coaster, the experience is making this ride full, even though it's not that crazily themed. On my first ride in this thing I was sitting in the front row, and while I was waiting for it to launch, which takes like over 30 seconds, my adrenaline was pumping. That feeling was just, I can't describe it. You have to ride this thing. On top of that, because the launch track is so long and it was just so hot, the end of the launch track was flickering in the distance. And now we're coming into the top 3. Those few rides are all perfect for what they are. On number 3 is Untamed at Walibi Holland, one of 2 RMC hybrid coasters that I've ridden. This ride has probably the best relation between amount of airtime and quality of airtime. About most of the airtime is ejector airtime, and even the floater moments like in the double inverting cornerstone is the best of floater airtime. And though this is a back row ride, even in the front row it's absolutely flying. And even in the moments where you don't expect the airtime to be that great, you're going to be absolutely ejected out of your seat. The park said that I think it had like 14 airtime moments, but this thing had 18. 18 airtime moments. and 16 of those airtime moments are ejector airtime moments. I probably would rank this thing higher than number 2, but number 2 is Steel Vengeance. I got a night ride on this thing, and that is keeping me from putting this below Untamed, because the night ride, oh my god, it wasn't in the very back, but more on the back half of the train, and it was absolutely flying. It had some ejector moments, but some of the hills were a little more floaty, and the inversions weren't quite as good, but this ride is just so long. You didn't see where you were going. It was absolutely hauling. It was just so long, never ending. It was extremely whippy, and the pacing is out of this world. I got a total of 3 rides on this coaster, and honestly, in the front row, this ride is forgettable, but in the back row and the night rides on this thing, holy heck. So, now, I guess you all know what's gonna be number 1. It's der Todeskerner at Hansa Park, my all-time favorite coaster. Recently, I ranked this just as high as Steel Vengeance, but after a few other night rides on this thing, this is better. While because Steel Vengeance is just so long and has so many airtime moments, this ride is non-stop intense. It's whipping you around unbelievably fast. While a normal ride during the day might be not quite as good as a night ride on Steel Vengeance, in the front or the second row on the very left side at night on this thing, it's the best thing ever. It's not only slightly better than a night ride on Steel Vengeance, but quite a bit better. But keep in mind, that comes from somebody who prefers intensity over airtime. So, there you have it. These are my top 30 personal favorite roller coasters. What are your favorite coasters? Do you like my list? Thanks for watching. Bye.